Well, my next guest started his career in 1958, and he didn't stop driving until 1992. But over that career, he amassed an incredible record setting 127 poles, over 700 top 10 finishes. But the biggest record is one that, well, conventional wisdom says will never be broken, and that's 200 victories. You know who I'm talking about. Richard Petty, the undisputed king of NASCAR and stock car racing, and he joins me here inside the wind tunnel. Richard, I hope you've been well.
Yeah, everything's been going good. We got through last year, and this year they're starting to open things up, all over the world. All over the United States. Racing, we're able to go to the races and stuff now. Last year we wasn't even able to go, and first part of this year we had to slip in to see the races. So every week they're opening up a little bit, but to get the economy going, they're going to have to open up everything.
Yeah, there's no question. And it's good to see that it's happening. And it was also very good to see that you'd been able to get back to the racetrack. The COVID-19 protocols kind of made it a little difficult, even for the king. I want to go back, though, to the early beginnings of Petty Enterprises, and specifically to your dad, who really was one of the pillars of the founding of NASCAR. What was he like? I had a chance to meet him a bunch of times, and he always struck me that he only believed that success came when you used common sense and worked harder than the next guy and did not suffer fools lightly.
Well, the big deal with my dad, he was 35 when he first started riding a race car, and most of the guys was 25, 28, so he was the old man to start with. But he drove the race car to make a living. A lot of the guys just come in, they run, and they had jobs during the week or whatever. So he was probably the first professional Cup driver that depended entirely on the purse. At that time, there was no sponsorship or nothing like that. So he had to finish in order to get enough money to get to the next racetrack. So he was known as Mr. Consistency because his record, you go back, I guess he ran 10 years or something like that. And as far as finishing in the top throughout all those years and the point stand and all that, he had to be pretty much had everything together and said, okay, in order to get anything, we've got to finish the race. So he was very calculating, I'll put it that way.
Well, it sounds to me like he passed on a lot of those attributes to you. Let's talk a little bit about when he decided to say, well, okay, kid, I'll give you a race car as well. Is it true that once you acquired the skill set and you won your very first race, he was the guy that protested your win?
Yeah, that was the first time I got the checker flag first. Okay. I was in Atlanta at the mile track in Lakewood, I think. And, I think they ran a 150-mile race on a mile dirt track. It was real dusty. And I think the scoring guys all got messed up anyhow. The flagman, it got so bad, the flagman got down out of the flagger stand and went over to the inside of the track to find out who was winning the race, who he needed to throw the flag to. And, I was running a convertible, a 57 Oldsmobile convertible, and he was running a 59 Oldsmobile hardtop. And at that time, they paid $500 more if you won in a model car, in a 59 car. You know what I mean? My car was 2 years old. So, that was the excuse he had for protesting me anyway. And hey, I was tickled to death. I ran second. That was the best I'd ever run anyway. So it was a good day. It was first and second.
Your career, and I believe that you shared this once with our mutual friend, the late great Barney Hall, was that you learned how to be a good race car driver. Is that true?
Well, yeah, you have to learn it. I mean, you got to have a little bit of talent. Okay, you know what I mean. A little bit of skill to begin with, but the deal was we pretty much studied everything. We studied the people we was running against. We studied the track. You didn't have computers and all that, so you had to do everything in your head. And talking to people that had experience and stuff. And I was fortunate to come along, when you had Fireball Roberts, Curtis Turner, Junior, a bunch of those people were running. And I learned Tim Flock was probably my hero because he never run the car sideways, but he always won the race. I mean, He was very particular on how he ran the car, and I like the way that he handled himself. So when I took him and said, okay, I want to be like him, I took a little bit of Junior, a little bit of Curtis, a little bit of Daddy, and said, okay, this is what Richard Petty needs to do to try to win races. And I'm just fortunate enough that the big deal with me, I came along at the right time as NASCAR was changing a little bit to begin with, and because it's been like 10 years. They started in 49. And so really everything was kind of changing to a new group of people, okay? And I came along at that time. I also came along when they first started super speedways. So you run against these old guys or older guys that had run short tracks and stuff, and they had a while to develop their skills running fast. So I was a rookie. I didn't know any better, So it was just the deal. And then my dad had put together a bunch of good people to work around me. My brother was building the engines. Dale Inman, crew chief, was working on the car and all that stuff. So we had a family business, and we looked at it as a business. We went every Sunday and tried to make up what we did the 6 days that we'd work. And just all come together. Just very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time under the right circumstances.
Well, that business evolved into a legacy. I mean, I can recall for so many years, you would have, Petty Enterprises Day. And my God, people would be lined up all the way down to downtown Randleman. I kind of looked at it and thought, here is a guy that will take as much time as necessary to interact with the fans. I saw you one time in the shower at Richmond, the old Richmond Fairgrounds Raceway, and you just wanted to get in the shower. And yet you didn't do that, sweating, just wet as a dish rag, signing autographs over and until the line was gone. How did that affinity, fans for you and you for the fans, develop?
Really, the first race I ever run was a convertible race at Columbia, South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe one person asked for an autograph. You know what I mean? And then the next race, 2 or 3 people asked for autographs. And then it kind of dawned on me that we got no sponsorship. We didn't know what sponsorship was at that time. And I said, look, if those people buy tickets, then the promoter gets the money from those people, and then the promoter pays me. So if we don't have spectators, I don't get paid. Okay. So it was one of the deals that just really worked out really for my advantage in a situation that, NASCAR was starting to be covered by more newspapers and magazines, all this kind of stuff. And it was kind of a deal that without fans, I mean, we ran all last year with no fans. Okay, if the TV hadn't been there, we wouldn't have got paid. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because wasn't no need of a guy sponsoring the car because nobody was seeing the thing, and you couldn't make personal appearances or none of that. But going back, it was just the kind of a deal that it just come together. People were interested in getting my autograph, and I said, man, that's great. I mean, they take his home and they show it to people, they've been to the race. Maybe they can talk somebody else going to the race the next time. It all come together, not because I wanted it or nothing, but just because I was able to communicate with these people. And one of the good things that helped me, even though I worked on the race car at home and all this kind of stuff, we got to the racetrack, then my brother Chief and Dale Inman sort of took care of the car. So when the race was over, then I just get out of the way. I go and sit on some tires or something, and then people come and get autographs. And then when they got loaded up, they'd come and get me, then we'd go home. And it just happened, at that time, people were really interested in something new. I mean, the North had football or baseball, the South had nothing. Okay. That was before, baseball, I think, went from Chicago to Boston to Washington, D.C., and that was it. So it was considered a national pastime, but it never came to the South as far as professional stuff. So racing was the first professional sport to show up in the South. And so all the Southern people, and it was kind of a deal. Even Atlanta was country at that time. Okay. And so they had all these country people that drove around in cars and stuff. So they got interested in running late model cars, whether it had a Plymouth or a Ford or Chevrolet, Dodge, whatever it was. So they come and pull for that deal. And what really helped me over the period of time was when I ran a Plymouth and it was running against Fords and Chevrolets or Pontiac. So when the Ford driver that they was pulling for fell out, they wasn't going to pull for a dead Chevrolet down, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So they pull for a Plymouth guy. So first thing you know, I was neutral. Okay. And I felt that way. And so one group, might be pulling, but like I say, when they fall out, instead of pulling for the other guys, they pull for me so that at least their car didn't get beat. You know what I mean? So it worked out pretty good for us.
Richard, some of the rivalries that you engaged in over the course of your career are legendary. Which one, if I forced you to choose one rivalry, would you say stands out the biggest and the best?
Well, okay, Pierce and myself raced together probably more than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it was a rivalry. We went out and we tried to beat the other guy and all this kind of stuff. The only accident we ever had was 76 at Daytona. I guess that's the only time we knocked each other out. And that wasn't on purpose. It just happened. But if you get down to a rivalry, it would probably be Allison.
Okay.
Me and him got to beating on each other pretty bad there.
That was legendary. Yeah.
So that was a real rivalry where we were just each determined to win no matter what it took to make it work. And, I think it come out pretty even. He knocked me out one race. I'd knock him out another, whatever it was. But it went on for about, I don't know, a year or something like that. Finally got so bad, we just had to say, okay, we got to do this before somebody gets hurt. And it wound up that at that time we had the best cars, I guess. And we could beat on each other, and maybe we was probably a lap ahead of the third place man. So we'd beat on each other. And I don't know that any of it or all of it was intentional as much as it just happened. I wound up racing with him or he wound up racing with me. And finally, I think after Wilkesboro somewhere, we went to California. I think we met coming out of the garage or something and said, okay, I'm going to beat the snot out of the next guy that says anything about what's going on. And now he's one of my best buddies. You know what I mean? Our families always got along. It was just me and Bobby, and then when the race was over, you'd see the Petties and Allisons with each other, talking to each other, but you wouldn't see me and Bobby. We wouldn't be talking to each other. So that was real rivalry.
I quickly want to go back to that 1979 Daytona 500. It's legendary. And Pearson, well, he got the car back into gear than before you did. What was going on inside the cockpit there? Because you were just about maybe 20 yards away from the start-finish line.
What happened when the car spun, the car choked down.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And then when it did, it was flooded. So when I turned the switch on to get it started, it wouldn't even turn over.
Oh, man.
The cylinders were full of gas. And, Pearson come down, and what straightened him out, somebody ran into him or he ran into somebody, kept him from going all the way in and hitting the inside guardrail. And so I don't know who it was or who he ran over, who ran over him. Anyhow, it straightened his car up, and he was able to grab a gear and get going again. So, that was, and then we'll go back. I'm going to talk about the 79 race, when Yarborough and whatever, and when they got into it on the back street, and we wound up winning the race. And I told them guys when it was over, I said, y'all ain't got no class. Y'all were wrecked on the back stretch and nobody could see you. Me and Pearson did it right in front of the grandstand. Everybody knew what was going on.
Look, you're one of the few people that I know that can probably address this issue, and that's the growth of NASCAR. You've watched it from its early beginnings. How do you feel about the direction that the sport is taking today?
The sport is just like everyday life. It's got to get a different deal going on. You still got to race, don't get me wrong, but the way we race and all that, the cars are strictly race cars now. In other words, used to, we started with a strictly stock car and kept modifying it. And finally, we modified it so much that nothing's on it stock. It's strictly a race car. But that is just progress. The big change that I see, of course, money's coming into the deal, but is everything's engineered now. Everybody's sitting in front of a computer like we are, punching them buttons, seeing what goes on, what the car's doing, what the track conditions are. Even during the race, they're checking all the track conditions. They got the crew chiefs now can sit in the grandstand, can sit in the pit and find out when you're on the gas, when you're on the brake, how much you turn in the steering wheel, stuff like that we didn't have a clue what was going on. We just done it. But the big deal was that we done it when nobody was advanced in front of us. Okay, we went along with the crowd. This crowd that's coming through, they've got to do whatever the next door guys do in order to stay competitive. So it's getting to be an electronic situation almost.
Yeah.
And it's if we really get right down to it right now, racing the way they've got the show and the way they're trying to, it's more of a show than it is race. And that's just progress. I mean, it had to be, not because we wanted to be, but see, we've got to, in our end of the deal, we've got to create new fans. Okay. And as everybody knows, the people that are coming through now are not as car oriented as we are.
Right.
Well, when we come up, and if my dad was a Chevrolet man, he was going to be a Chevrolet man. I was going to be a Chevrolet. If he's a Plymouth man, which he was, I was a Plymouth man. But now, you go to somebody's house and they got 3 or 4 kids. They got 3 or 4 different kind of cars. They're from, Korea or Africa or wherever they make the thing. And so and also the people that are coming through now are not getting their license when they're 16 years old. Man, when we got 15 years old, we couldn't wait till we got to be able to get our license and drive legal. Okay, even though we was driving around anyway. But the people are not interested in that stuff now, and so that is, how do we get to these people? So we're going to have to do it electronically, because everybody is sitting around now. All the new generations and stuff that's coming through are oriented to computers. So we've got to say, okay, how can we get those people away from the computer to the racetrack? And so if we can do it through computerized situations in the car, where they know how fast the car is running, they know what the temperature in the car, they know when their driver's got foot on the gas, so they'll be able to watch the race and also keep up with all the stuff that's going on with the car and the driver, and they can listen to the crew. So it's got to be commercial. Okay,
Yeah.
I guess is one way to look at it.
Give me a couple of drivers, because look, you're still an avid observer of what's going on. Give me a couple of drivers that you think we should keep an eye on that are at the beginning of their careers.
It's really hard to say, because if you've been around long enough to know, about every 10 or 12 years, we turn over the top drivers, and they retire, so we bring in a new crowd. I mean, when me and Pearson and Allison stuff came along, that got rid of, Herb Thomas and Lee Petty and in that particular crowd. Okay. Then when, Dale Earnhardt came along, Jeff Gordon came along, that's another generation from the Pearsons and Allisons and the Petty.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we're getting ready to do the same thing to another generation change, not only changing the cars for next year, which will be completely different than anything we've ever had, but these drivers are new drivers. They're young drivers, so they won't have to unlearn as much as what I would if I had to get in the car. So they can learn with the new technology and stuff, and they're already computerized because these guys is 18, 20 years old. I didn't even, and they've been driving something since they're 5 or 6 years old. I never sat in a race car till I was 21 years old.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I was fortunate enough to be able to start at the top because we started in the Cup Series. But anyhow, the new generation will help draw a new generation because you got a new crowd that's coming through that's 20, 15, 20, 25 years old. They're not going to pull for somebody that's 40 years old. They're going to pull for somebody in their category. So as we change, as NASCAR changes, we're changing the drivers, and NASCAR is going to be completely different in 3 or 4 years than what it is today. And it's definitely different than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago. It's just a different ball game altogether.
For sure. Hey, listen, before I let you go, one last question. When did you start wearing that cowboy hat?
Well, from time to time, I used to, even in 69, you see me with the Ford and stuff, I had a hat. And from time to time, I wore a cowboy hat. Kyle, my son, started what he called Kyle Petty Boot Barn, started selling boots.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Because they were into horses and all that stuff. And the Charlie One Horse guy came by one day and said, I'd like for you to sell hats. He hadn't been selling hats. And I don't know. The guy said, look, I know your dad wears one from time. Let me give you one. You give it to your dad. And if he likes it, then, will you take up and start selling them? He said, yeah, if my dad likes it, we'll start selling them in store. So I got one of them and, I said, man, this is really a neat deal. And the guy was out of West Chicago, Illinois, doing cowboy hats. Okay.
Go figure.
We was up close there one time and I went over and talked to him and stuff. And so we cut a deal that he makes Richard Petty hats and stuff. And then what happened, I must have got 1,000 of them from time to time. And every time I need a new hat, I just call him and he sends me a hat. And then after I wear them a while, I'll autograph them and give them to some charity deal.
Wow.
Where the guys can sell the things and, make some money for charity. So that's the reason that you see some people with some of them, and then, from time to time, you use them for a political deal. You give them to somebody that's helped you out in your racing career. So that's how the Charlie One Horse hats came. And, it was just one of the deals that you didn't mean to make a persona or anything. It just happened. Same way with the glasses, the hat, you know what I mean? And it just, I didn't set out to be what you see Richard Petty looking like now. It just happened. And I think I'm glad it did.
Well, and millions of people are equally glad. I am just absolutely honored that you took some very precious time to visit with me. I consider you an old friend, and I wish you and your family nothing but the very best, because it's been a long ride, but it has been a good ride, Richard.
We're still digging.
Yeah.
I still go and tell them to go faster. You know what I mean?
Listen, I appreciate it. You be
Okay,
well.
babe.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a good week.